The original video that I made for beginners Okizeme was far too in-depth, so this is going to be a more concise and general concept idea behind sort of the decisions that you can make and why. When we knock our opponent down, we can meaty with a bunch of different buttons. Close standing heavy punch, which pushes us far back so that we can, keep them sort of controlled. Close standing medium punch, which pushes us back a little bit. That can also be confirmed into standing light kick dash punch against a lot of different characters. Those are high parryable only. We then have crouching light kick, which is very hard, but it is possible to meaty with. It only is active for one frame. So it's stuff like short dash punch and crouching short into Zenpo. Then you have crouching medium kick, mostly done at ranges which is hard for specific characters to punish, but it is possible to just use it as a confirm and a dash punch if you are good at that sort of thing. And then you have close standing medium kick, which is a launcher, also high only parryable. These two are low only parryable. Crouching medium punch exists as well. This move is +5, so you're able to very easily get stuff like Zenpo tension, but it is high-low parryable, so even though it goes relatively easily into frame trap stuff, that doesn't really get you too far if your opponent is option parrying. And then you have close standing light punch, which is its own sort of frame trap, but it also is high-low parryable, and this goes into 1, 2, 3. You can also get dive kicks that hit front, or they hit from behind. It's the same dive kick done at different timings. You also have, neutral jump medium kick dive kicks and other decisions. And against some characters, you can just straight jump and get meaty timing for your jump-ins or your neutral jump attacks. This makes for safe jump possibilities against a lot of the cast, but some of them require specific setups. So throws are a different beast. Normally throws are done or started at a distance like this, where you're out of their own throw range, and then you tap forward and carry throw. So this basically repeats itself if you want it to. But off of this, you get cross-ups, you get all sorts of stuff. Now, this keeps them in the corner, which is the most important part, because it allows you to control space if you so desire. Or it lets you just straight, build meter and run away. Now, if you were to do a back throw, it puts your opponent in the middle of the screen, so follow-ups can be a little bit harder if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, it's just how can you position yourself to make your next decision profitable for you. Or simply building meter, especially if you get a back throw or something in mid-screen. Now, something important about Yun's throw in general is that it moves 50% of the stage. So from this door here, which is 50% of the stage, like right in the middle, if we get a forward throw and we dash up and Ken quick rises, he's essentially cornered. And now if we back throw here, Ken's going to end up right back at that door. So if you don't have a particular goal, like getting extra meter or something, Zenpo is usually not all that strong, because doing stuff like dash up follow-ups is not all that great. You can, dive kick into specific spacings to sort of bridge the gap, which lets you make other decisions or lets you get closer neutral. Now, what I talked about with meter, if you look at how much meter Yun has, you're able to whiff one thing and then activate. So this means that you can effectively whiff a dive kick and then activate, or you can make some other sort of decision that will allow you to activate. Now this is very distance, or I shouldn't say distance, but meter specific. The less meter that you have, the less this can be used. Now, you can also reduce your meter even more, let's say 50%, where if you think that your follow-up will be successful and give you meter, it may be a viable option. Last thing about Zenpo is that whiff dive kick into a throw after a Zenpo is going to fully corner your opponent on the other side of the screen. So movement and positioning is really important. Now, I've already talked about going to this spacing sort of for the throw, right? And the goal here is to be out of throw range of your opponent, just like this. So when you knock your opponent down, there are situations where you can either whiff specific amounts of normals and then sort of back up. But depending on how fast your opponent gets up, if they're quick rising or not and all that stuff, you may or may not be able to walk out of range. As I just showed, Ken tried to throw me to put me into proximity guard, which is usually not the best case scenario. So movement and positioning is very important, and I already talked about getting to this sort of spacing, right? So off of this, you can manage to, walk to this spacing, and then manage to get your meaty and hit Ken. You can also hit with delayed attacks to stop guard jump. There's a lot of ways that you can approach this. You can, throw and then walk to this range and then walk back. Shimmy. You can either, walk forward and then walk back after a dash punch, or, you can walk back really far and then walk forward into max distance crouch medium kick range. There's a lot of decisions that you can make specifically based on spacing. So if you know that this is, someone that likes to just sort of block and make the decision, you could walk back to a spacing where you know that a dive kick is either going to whiff in front of them and give you a throw option, or a Zenpo, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever it is that you want to do. But it gives your opponent the ability to react. So if you were to do this off of this, there's other decisions that can be made as well based on your decisions. So your positioning dictates what is available to you. So when you're up close, you have highs and you have lows that are, relatively fast. But the further you are away, the less options you have. From about under the timer, you have max range far medium kick, far standing heavy punch, micro step forward crouching medium kick at like max range. You have light punch shoulder, and then you have, sort of neutral jump things to keep them at bay, and then you have specific dive kicks that will open them up. Movement in general, makes the opponent have to second guess the decisions they're making because they don't know what sort of positioning you're going to end up at. Are you going to walk back and then walk forward? Are you going to walk back and stay where you are? Are you going to walk forward and then go for a meaty? Are you going to, walk forward and then walk back and get out of range of their throw at the last second? There's a lot of ways that you can approach this, and your opponent has to easily, or I should say try, to figure out what your next decision is based on your movement. And sometimes it's very hard, specifically if you're good at hiding your intentions. Now, movement allows you to show intent and then change your intent at the last second, at least in some matchups. Against other matchups, it's harder. Like if you're walking forward too much and then you try to walk out of Ken's throw range, it's possible. However, it's not possible to walk out of range of things like Hugo's SPD range, doing something like this. So this means that you'd have to immediately start walking out a little bit faster. Otherwise, you'd be thrown out of, walking back by Hugo with his SPD. So you can also just, use jumps as a way of movement, where your opponent has to figure out exactly what you want to do, if you're going to be pressing a button, if you're just going to empty jump, that does count as a way of moving. So the concept of doing nothing is very simple. You walk to a spacing where you know your opponent can't throw you, and they have to make a decision. You see if they jump, you see if they parry, you see what they do. Your goal is just to be out of range of throw, which against some characters you don't even have to move after a dash punch. Some characters can walk forward and throw you, or tap forward and throw you. It really is dependent on the character. But your goal is just to, sort of sit at a range where you know that nothing can happen and see how they react. and then use that information to mount an offense or decide how you want to approach your Okizeme. Every character gets up at different timings. There's a different amount of frames that they have while they're in the air for specific things, so like close standing medium kick or back throw or something, or forward throw, they get thrown in the air. It's the same thing off of dash punch. There's a different timing for them to get up from when they just get hit with a dash punch or when they get hit with a dash punch in the air. So this allows different things, right? So let's say I get my Ender and Ganajin, which allows me to do forward fierce into Kara dash punch. I'm only able to whiff 3 times of crouching medium punch before Urian gets up. However, I'm able to whiff 4 times after up kicks, so I have more time to build meter or more time to position and manipulate my opponent's decisions with movement. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not possible off of the dash punch, because it absolutely is. But certain characters, it's better to do specific enders based on how much extra time you get and what you can do with that extra time. But just knowing that there's a difference between how long it takes your opponent to get up off of a throw, off of up kicks, off of a dash punch and all that stuff, and how their juggle weight sort of influences how fast they're able to get up, matters a lot. And specific characters get up really fast after throws, and specific characters get up really fast after dash punches and stuff by comparison to others. So until you get more advanced and you start considering frame data and all that stuff, then you're going to have to just sort of eyeball it and come up with your own ways of approaching these situations yourself. It can be done mathematically, which the Ganajin or the Yun 201 video for in-depth Okizeme explains a little bit, but until that point, just knowing that this exists matters. So Quickrise and No Quickrise make all the difference in the world. If Ken doesn't Quickrise, I can whiff 3 crouching medium punches and then make a delay and then get a meaty. However, if he Quickrises, he throws me out of the startup of my 3rd crouching medium punch. So if I want to meaty him, I have to make sure that my frames are fast enough so that I can actually do that. Now, it can be very difficult to do, which is why against specific characters, you go back to the whole movement thing. You whiff once, and then you move back and forth, or you whiff once and then you jump. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and it all depends on if your opponent has a fast quick rise or a slow quick rise by comparison to other characters, depending on the knockdown that you're using. Now, quick rise and no quick rise can screw up setups. So as an example, if we knock Ken down and then we go for a dive kick, oh crap, we just dive kicked ourselves into the corner, and that's not the best thing for to have happen. So that means that you have to jump out of the corner or hard commit to a high-low throw. Those are really your only options. So your opponent can influence what your decisions are, and you have to be able to react to if your opponent is quick rising or not. So that's why some people will, do 2 crouching medium punches, but they'll do them much slower, because they're reacting to the opponent doing the quick rise during the first one. And this is applicable to all characters across the board. You can change what you're doing, and you can change your timings on things very easily. Now, the important part about this is that you are not in control of when this happens. You can make guesses based on what your opponent has done in the past and how they've handled knockdown situations, but they always do have the decision where they can quick rise or not quick rise, which can screw up some of your, decisions that you may want to make if they're usually done as like a set play or a particular setup that you're trying to do. So you have to have an out if those things fail. Your defensive options are pretty simple. You can just straight block. You can attempt to jump out, which depending on the situation, you may or may not be able to. Now right now Ken is doing a delayed attack, so that if I try to guard jump, he'll hit me. However, if I were to wake up with a button, there's a chance that I will hit him. And particular with Yun, it's either going to be 1, 2, 3, or it's going to be close standing medium punch. You can do crouching light kick or standing light kick as well, depending on the situation, but it can be risky. Now, if we guard jump, which is you guard, and then you jump, and then you guard again, at a specific timing, then you're able to jump out of the situation. You can also just straight hold up and get out of situations where your opponents are trying to throw you. Now, this can be very important. Now, the other thing is, if your opponent is trying to throw you, you can wake up with buttons, and it will win. As long as the opponent is timing it correctly, so that the throw is a little bit meaty, you will technically be able to hit them because standing light punch and standing medium punch are both fast enough, and standing light kick, where your opponent, if they want to throw you, need to do it at a very specific timing in order to get it to work. And otherwise you are using the frames that you have where you are invulnerable when you're getting up, where you press a button during those frames and that button comes out sort of at the end of those frames. So you end up getting that invulnerability and you're able to hit them during their throw. So here are some examples of that. See, if I pressed heavy punch, I get thrown. I pressed medium punch and I did it a little too late. If I time it correctly, then I get the medium punch, fierce punch. Standing light kick. Crouching light kick requires a little bit stricter timing, but it is possible. Now, this changes depending on if you quick rise or not, and if your opponent thinks you're going to quick rise or not. Because everything is a game of give and take, you are playing with information that you have versus information that your opponent has, and eventually, you know, these may stop working, they may start walking up and down parrying, they may start walking up and doing whatever. So here's an example of that. So all Ken has to do is walk up and down parry, and crouching light punch will get hit. He can also just stand where he is in specific situations and forward parry because, well, you think that he's in range and he can just take that micro step forward and throw. That may not be his goal or the decision that he's going to make. I cannot stress, though, how important blocking is. And the reason for this is because blocking reduces the amount of decisions that your opponent can make. It's the same thing if your opponent blocks. If your opponent's just blocking, they have to respect your throw and they have to respect your Zenpo tension. But if they're guest parrying, then they have to worry about a whole lot more. If they're not guest parrying and they're just in situations where they are blocking all the time, you know, they don't have to care if you do close standing medium punch or close standing medium kick or crouching medium kick or crouching light kick. There's not really a whole lot they have to worry about because they're just going to block it. The only things they have to technically worry about is if they're crouch blocking and you hit them with overheads, so forward medium kick or universal overhead. But in general in this game, very few characters have overheads that really go into a whole lot, and Yun needs very specific spaced universal overheads so that he can combo into standing light kick, into dash punch. So as a general rule of thumb, blocking, as long as you have the ability to not worry about being thrown, so if you have the life to give, so to speak, if you think that your opponent likes to meaty a lot, if you think that they're, you know, trying to beat guard jumps or whatever it is, they're doing delayed attacks, block beats all of this stuff. And blocking matters a lot because it forces your opponent to work harder for their damage and work harder for their mix-up. As soon as you start guessing with down parry or forward parry, whether it's an educated guess or not, you risk yourself losing, where you're either going to get hit with a meaty in the opposite direction, or you're just going to whiff that parry. And unless you're doing parry and then throw at a specific timing, where your parry doesn't allow you to not tech your opponent's throw, then parry throw may or may not be a strong choice. But committing to parry throw means that you are only giving your opponent like one, or that's like your only option, right? You're not parrying and then waiting for the parry and then making a good punish, like crouching medium punch dash punch, which does 15% damage and 20% meter. You're getting that throw. You're getting them off of you and you're putting them mid-screen, which is a great situation to be in, as opposed to being in the corner. But, if you're parrying and then throwing in the back into the corner itself, that can be strong as well. And certain characters rely on these a lot more than others. Like, Urien gets a lot more off of back throw than other characters because of his sort of corner pressure and how he can use Aegis. Denjin Ryu with how he can use his Denjin. Every character's back throw is a little bit more dangerous than their forward throw, obviously. But as the twins, if you're waking up and you're parry throwing, it doesn't matter if you forward parry or back parry because it gets you out of the situation back into neutral. And while, yes, it is better for you to back throw your opponent because you get more control, the forward parry is not going to kill you in a lot of situations.